Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the He Lives podcast. The genius of working with animals is they are everywhere and they are constantly giving us messages. Even when we are scrolling on social media, listening to songs, watching movies, all the clues are there. We just have to listen and decode them. And this podcast will help you do that. Today, I channel one of my favorite animals, the woodlouse. Such gentleness, such peace and prosperity. The story around the woodlouse and how it has influenced my life is quite extraordinary, so please stick around for the discussion after the channeling to learn more about its spiritual wisdom and magic. So let's dive right on in. I welcome my ancestors as I welcome the spirit of the woodlouse. He lives straight from the heart. I am nothing more than a helpful guide. A guide that will take you deeper than you have ever been into the depths of your own soul. I am partially a gatekeeper, but none have named me that before, for it is mostly my purpose to entertain those who wish to delve deeper into the soul mind of love. I always land on my feet because I have so many of them, but my true message is one of high standing. It is all about how you stand and what you stand for the greater your sacrifice, the greater your standing. The message is clear. What do you stand for? Do you stand for love? Or do you roll yourself up into a ball and cower in fright and fear? So, let me tell you a story, a grand story of love that will open you up to the wisdom that I offer. Once upon a time, there was a man named Albert. He was a kind and sensitive man, a man of composure who took pride in his kindness of heart. His presence was frightening to others. He was tall and broad, built like a giant, and when he stood, people took notice. But it was not his presence or size that made him remarkable. It was what he stood for. Albert had taken all the steps necessary to heal himself from a life of terrible wounds. He was a warrior who had served his time on the battlefield defending the kingdom. He had sacrificed it all to protect the kingdom of love, and now the wars were finally over. He had taken steps to live his life brand new, away from the battlefield, albeit as a wounded warrior. He carried deep wounds of shame, the shame of being involved in a war filled with atrocities, unspeakable acts of cruelty, and for someone as sensitive and kind as Albert, they became difficult memories to shake off. Beyond his self-abuse, he began to heal, and like on the battlefield as a warrior, he became devoted to healing himself from the scars of battle, and began to go deeper and deeper inside to release all the shame he had not had the time to feel. War does strange things to the minds of men, and so he went so deep inside that he left the outside world and lived a quiet life away from his fellow people, and in doing so, it had made him afraid to connect with those very people he had pushed away, because as he saw it, his love had protected him on the battlefield, and now he must repay the honor by protecting people from his love. So much betrayal on the battlefield had left him confused, living a lie that his love was too painful for others to feel, and so he turned himself into his own worst enemy. But all that would change. His life before now was fight after fight, an endless battle, and like any man, Albert had made many mistakes, but he had learned from them, and he wished to help others benefit from what he had been through, so others did not have to. He desired to serve off the battlefield in the name of love, by showing the world how to heal the unhealable wounds of shame, betrayal, despair, and ruin, and so he devoted his life to healing himself and learning the antidotes to all he had suffered in hopes that someone would listen to what he had to say. But before he could reach his goal, he had one thing left to do. He must learn who he truly is, for without knowing who he truly was, he would not be able to understand what he is, and to know what he is would truly help him understand his divine purpose. For without it, he would not be able to transcend his suffering. Albert had spent far too long diverging from his true purpose. He had delayed and delayed out of fear, the fear of how others may judge him for his overbearing presence of love and belief of what he was sharing. For how could such a wounded man be such a great healer? After spending so much time away from people, healing all and licking all his wounds, Albert began to share his wisdom with those who listened. The problem he had at first was nobody would listen, because nobody believed that such a man or wisdom could be true. A warrior, a man hidden amongst men, a man that came out of nowhere with such profound wisdom and devotion that most couldn't even consider the truth of his words, because they had all but lost belief in the idea of their own enlightenment, something that would be available for everyone and anyone. How could such a thing be true? Was the feeling that stirred in people's souls. And so he was ignored for a time, and he felt disheartened that nobody would listen, until one day he was heard. It only took one person to acknowledge him, to find his belief, to keep going, to keep sharing his wisdom, so that one day people would understand that he had the keys of wisdom that could unshackle mankind from his self-imprisonment. He had travelled the world inside him, but he had reached an impasse with himself, and so now he would need to travel the world on the outside. He was not able to see himself, he was not able to honour himself in the way that he deserved, because he had devoted himself to such deep service he had forgotten his place in it all. He had become so humble he had forgotten his worth, and in doing so could not see how great a man he was. In being in such service, Albert had gained many deep insights into his own human behaviour, but for such a powerful man he could not see himself in the mirror as he truly wished. So he would often question himself. Have I got it right? Have I done wrong by myself? Have I hurt someone? Because he still believed he was on the battlefield, and he still believed himself to be the enemy, but he was the love, the antidote. He had been programmed to fight false enemies for so long that he had it backwards. He had not learned how to fight for his life, his heart, and his own passionate desires for how he truly wished to live his life. Why do I struggle when others fight? What makes people fight when all I can do is be weighed down by my woes? He would ask himself. To overcome his wounded heart, he began to travel the kingdom. He could no longer stay hidden from his life, for he had to be amongst the people in order for them to hear him. In doing so, Albert learned more about himself, more things than he imagined. But what interested him the most was overcoming obstacles, because that is what stood out to him more than others. Despite his own deep suffering, he still needed to see that he was a man, and so when he walked down the street or was invited into the house of another to dine or converse, he was always overjoyed at the way people held themselves in even the most difficult of times. Each time he found himself in feelings of worry, despair, or dread, he felt like the whole world was on his shoulders. But when he met others with worries or circumstances that seemed grander than his, he could not help but be amazed by how well they dealt with their emotions and continued to live a wonderful life, despite all their troublesome circumstances. It was always a humbling and loving experience for him. Such thoughts were common for Albert when he first began his journey, but each time he was met with kindness from a stranger on his travels, he saw his own life mirrored back to him, was plentiful and free, and in comparison golden. All he needed was the awareness to see that, and he saw it mirrored in others he met. And he began to learn that life was always there to be embraced. He just needed to show the truth of his heart, to show his kindness and humanity by treating himself with the same respect that he treated others. He had to forgive himself. After finishing his travels, Albert began to sense something else was missing: love. His kindness was becoming for any woman to feel, at worst, a lucky woman, but at best a queen. And so befitting a queen, he was suited to be a king. As word got out of his presence and his remarkable standing as a man, he was met with cherish and praise. And when the news of his remarkable wisdom spread throughout the kingdom, he was met with an invite. an invite from the royal palace, no less. Being such a graceful man, Albert was shocked that he had been in such high standing, but this was it. This was exactly the medicine he had been searching for, the medicine of service delivered back to him, the medicine of deliverance. His time in the kingdom was met with so much praise that he was awarded the role of knight, a hero of the kingdom, and in doing so was invited to be met by the Queen herself, Queen Peralta, ruler of the 9 divine kingdoms of love. The Queen was highborn, but she herself had been on her own healing journey. She had been betrayed and cast out of the kingdom at a young age by her own family, for her power was too great for them. She was an oracle, and she foresaw her own family's betrayal and was cast out. She fought a long and tedious battle to reclaim her rightful throne as the one and only true queen of the kingdoms of 9. And so it was predicted by the oracle that one day, when the queen returned, so would the king. When she heard of Albert, she was quite taken back by the stories told of his bravery on and off the battlefield. She was encapsulated by the sacrifices he had made and started to see how his stories reminded her of her own sacrifice. And so she made sure to invite him to the palace. On that fateful day, Albert arrived at the castle. He adorned his shining suit of golden armor with red cloth befitting the highest rank of knighthood. He had never set eyes on the queen before. He had only been in service to her kingdom. The queen awaited at the top of the steps to the palace, in waiting to deliver his reward. It was a bright and sunny day, and the sunlight was reflecting from his shining armor onto the hands of those who covered their eyes, unable to bear witness to such divine light. His presence was enough for all to take notice as he climbed the staircase to meet the queen. The light had protected his gaze from hers until at the top of the steps he was met, and there their eyes met for the first time. When he reached the top of the steps, he was guided to remove his helmet and kneel before the queen so he may be knighted. With his gaze downwards and on his knees, the queen knighted him with her sword and asked him to stand. He towered above her, and as he opened his eyes, he was quite taken back by her beauty. She looked him in the eyes with a hidden smile behind her dignified sovereign manner and continued to gaze deep into his soul, and was aghast to find there were no limitations within him that she could see. Whenever she had gazed upon a man using her powers of oracle, she had always seen control, but this man did not desire to control her, or anyone for that matter. This was a free man, a man who stood in his heart. The queen spoke. "You are knighted with the highest honour I could bestow upon a knight, Sir Albert. For your bravery in the face of danger, in the face of cruelty, you have defended my kingdom, and for that you have my undying thanks. But that is not all I have to give to you today. I also present you with your own land and kingdom as a noble lord for your service. Please come inside the palace for the feast and celebration, and we shall have a more private conversation." The onlookers clapped and rejoiced at his knighthood, and a party began to parade in the streets, because unbeknownst to the queen there was talk amongst the town that Sir Albert could be the king from the prophecy. Inside he was invited to dine with the divine family of 9 and fellow noble families. He sat comfortably after removing his armour and dined at a banquet where he was offered fine teas and magnificent feasts to quench his hunger and thirst. The queen invited Albert to sit close to her on her right side. It was unexpected for the queen to dine so close to her subjects, but this day was not like any other, as they found each other deep in conversation and laughter. Any onlooker would have told you that that day the queen had never looked so joyous and content as when she spoke with Albert. As the nobles dined and danced, she raised a glass to Sir Albert and asked him to accompany her to the ballroom floor for a dance. The balconies were full of those lucky enough to be invited to the palace, and the dance floor parted by nobles made room as she led him by hand to the centre opening. On the marble floor was a sacred etching of a magical talisman of love, designed to look like a magical beast, but above it a motif that read, "Dance unto death, and you shall be rewarded with life. Albert, still catching up with his own success, was at first bewildered by the speed at which she came to him and led him to the dance floor. They arrived into the centre of the floor, and by her hand she began to throw him into dance, where he could no longer hold back, and together they twirled and curled around each other, creating a dancing tornado of love, where onlookers glared as they glistened like twinkling stars in the night sky. The couples who witnessed them gazed at each other as their love was mirrored back to them, and each couple knew something special was happening. A new story of love was opening, a story that would inspire not just the kingdom, but the world, because all would be encapsulated by their love. The end, but not really the end. All of this is a great story, but what does it mean for our faithful warrior Albert? Stories have a beginning and an end, but what if I told you this story was still playing out? What if I told you that this story was and is the story of your life? What if you're just one step away from being the protagonist of your own story? How many times can you speak the words of love before you are thrown from your own horse and fall back down to earth with a thud? How many times must a man fall before he can rise to the occasion of love? A love that never ends or begins, it just is. A love so deep it enamors the gaze of all those who witness into a trance of wonder and belief in something greater than they have ever witnessed. Because this is the day of days, the day that all who witness the greatest love that has ever been known stand on the shoulder of giants as the prophecy of the resurrection of the kingdom of love begins. This story does not end here, it is only the beginning. But let us now seek a different truth as I pass you over to the most important part of the story, as we join Alistair in discussing the true power of the Woodlouse. Thank you for listening. If you wish to learn more about what the mysteries of this channeling are, please subscribe to my podcast on Spotify to unlock the wisdom.